Hi, I just saw the original Miracle on 34th Street movie from oh man, I wrote down the year and now I can't find it. But like the early 1900s, like maybe the 1930s, the black and white version. I just saw that for the first time and I want to talk about it. All right, so first thing is there were lots of little themes, which is annoying. Like there was, I think, the theme of like how um, the mom of the movie didn't like believe in fairy tales and she didn't, like value the intangibles, quote unquote. Um, at least not as much as she should, and she kind of put that on her daughter too, and kind of made her daughter um, also kind of not value the intangibles and not value magic and love and romance and all that stuff. Um, and then there was also like the theme of how like this nice old man, Santa Claus, was like the crazy person, and then like the mean people were the sane people, and that's messed up. And then there was the theme of like, with the with the younger guy. I actually really liked it with the younger guy who pretended, who would dress up as Santa, and he was told that he had like a guilt complex because he would go out and do nice things. And I guess that kind of goes with like the moral of like how it's normal to be mean and crazy to be nice. So there were lots of little things kind of sprinkled throughout the movie, and it kind of is annoying because then it's not like super focused, and you can't like focus in on like the one moral of the story or like the one main moral. But I think the one main moral was just about like quote unquote real life versus like the ethereal, intangible stuff. And the idea that like real life is like hard and cruel and cold and empty and magicless, and then everything else, all the magical, wonderful, intangible, love-filled stuff is ridiculous and crazy and worthless. So then that's what some people want you to think, but this movie was saying the opposite. That's I think the overall theme is that the ethereal, intangible stuff is the important stuff. Like that's the stuff you need to value, and that's not necessarily not real life. It's part of real life too. And so that I like how this movie made it clear. I mean, it's a really fluffy movie. Like it's like super, it's about Santa Claus. But I liked how they made it clear in like this fluffy old movie that some people are just bad people and they can't be reasoned with. Like that guy, that psychologist, and and then they just can't be reasoned with. There's nothing you can say to them, because that's true. There are some people who are just bad. Like not everyone is, just secretly good and just needs like some help or whatever. Some people are just bad. And so I liked how also the real quote unquote world actually worked for the intangible stuff. So it showed how, the intangible stuff is part of the real world, and the real world kind of can help make the intangible stuff happen. Like the way that Santa Claus ended up being like having his name cleared or like being declared sane was because of like just this little real world thing that happened where some post office workers wanted to clear out the Santa Claus letters out of the office, and so they sent it to him, right? That's, that was pretty clever, I thought, because it showed how the real world and the intangible magical stuff of the world are not separate and they work together. And I think that, I don't know, I don't really know if I believe this, but I once watched, like, a movie that was talking about how maybe, like, the miracle of the loaves and the fishes, where Jesus, like, multiplied the loaves and the fishes. how it was possible that maybe all that happened was that people added like their own loaves and fishes to like the pile secretly without telling anyone, and so overall everyone thought it was like a miracle. And the thing is, like, I don't know, maybe it was like magic and he and Jesus did actually like multiply the loaves and the fishes, but even if he didn't, even if it was just people, each individual person adding their own food to the pile, and just not telling anyone so that everyone kind of thought maybe it was a miracle, that doesn't mean it's not a miracle. That wouldn't change how I view that miracle, because just because, you know, the real world worked in a way that just because it was the real world working to make a miracle happen doesn't mean it wasn't like a miracle. You know what I'm saying? I don't know if I'm explaining this clearly. Let me know if I'm explaining this clearly in the comments. But I'm just saying, I think that's really clever, because I do think that God works through the real world, works through real people. And just because he's working through those things, the real things, doesn't mean he's not working. Doesn't mean God isn't doing stuff. He is doing stuff. That's how he does stuff, is through people and through like actual physical things. So this movie could actually be applied to God, and I kind of almost want to say that it is like secretly about like a metaphor for God, like Santa Claus is a metaphor for God, just because it feels kind of silly to me to be like, I feel silly personally to watch this movie and be like, this is about Santa Claus, because honestly, it hits all these emotional beats, and it hits them so well, and it actually like tugs at my heartstrings. And so it makes me feel kind of silly that I'm like getting sort of emotional over this movie about the existence of Santa Claus, because I don't believe in Santa Claus and I don't see any reason to believe in it. And I'm not like making fun of people who do, because, you know, it's whatever. I don't care. But I personally don't. So I just feel kind of silly making this about actually Santa Claus. But I think it is just actually about Santa Claus. I don't think it is a metaphor for God. But there are a lot of emotional beats in this movie that it hits really well. Oh, and then also Natalie Wood was the daughter. And Natalie Wood is famous for like being an unsolved murder case. So I thought it's kind of surreal to like watch her as a child, but she was really good. Like her expressions were really good for being such a young kid. She was a really good actress, so I can see why she was famous. So that was interesting. It had that other famous actress that I can't remember the name of now. I'm sorry. I really need to work on making better notes. But it was like Maureen. Was it Maureen? Maureen? The Marines. I'm sorry. I don't know. I can't remember. Forget it. I'm sorry. Moving on. The next thing is that lots of times there were men left alone with this little girl. And I felt like that was kind of creepy. And I watched like this thing not recently, like a few months ago on YouTube, about how Shirley Temple was like kind of secretly child porn. And like I never would have thought that, because I grew up watching Shirley Temple and I thought it was like perfectly wholesome, and everyone thinks that it's perfectly wholesome, but like looking at it through another lens, like this video on YouTube was saying, you can definitely see how it's kind of child porn. But so it kind of made me a little bit more vigilant about like this movie, because this girl was left alone so often with men, and like as a child I wouldn't have thought that was a big deal at all. As an adult now, I can see how it's dangerous for a little girl to kind of just be left alone with these grown men. And so what's kind of even like scarier after watching that video on YouTube, I see how so many adults still kind of feel like, at least in old movies, it was perfectly normal and okay for stuff like this to happen. And so it's just kind of scary that there might still be adults in the world who think that it's okay to like leave a little girl alone with grown men like that. Yeah, so that was the only real problem I had with the movie. And then I have a question. I don't know if this movie is still super relevant today, because I don't know if kids today still believe in Santa Claus. Do they? I don't know. I don't know a lot of kids. So if you know any kids who still believe in Santa Claus, leave a comment below and let me know. Okay. Well, so that's it. It was pretty good. Thanks for watching.